or whoever else y'all want to bring to the table.
At the request of the board again, we are excited to workshop with you today the current state of our alternative education program. We are aware that there are growth opportunities for maximizing our students to reach their greatest potential within our alternative education programs. Our workshop today will focus on the current processes and seek permission from the board to return to you with a plan outlining the desired state and recommendations. The timeline for the desired state will be addressed at the conclusion of this presentation. It is important for me to note that today's presentation, it is aligned to the revised policy, to the revised Audit Policy 8.13, that is also seeking approval along with the revised Alternative Ed Manual. And the last revision of this manual was in 2015. The team has worked very hard to have all required processes aligned per policy and in place for the start of this academic year. To assist this afternoon with our presentation on the current state of our alternative education, June and Lisa will continue to assist us. Most importantly, I do want to introduce you to Mrs. Elaine Hubbard-Williams. She is the Director for Student Support Services that will be leading the presentation, along with Ms. Shonda Garvin-Shaw, Manager for Support Services that works very, very closely with our alternative schools. But once again, board, we do understand that there is significant need for us to review our current state, and we are aware that there is definitely room for growth opportunities for us within our alternative education programs. And we want you to know that we are indeed committed to that. And again, the last slide you will see is a desired state and a timeline for us wanting to come back to talk to you in regards to how we would like to move forward. But today, it's strictly looking in regards to our current processes and now being aligned to our proposed policy, revised policy, and having a manual that's now aligned to the revised policy if approved by the board. Ms. Hubbard-Williams.
Thank you, and good afternoon.
Excuse me, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, I just want to state for the record as well. So sometime last year, I actually visited all the alternative schools, and I think I spoke to every board member, at least privately, around we absolutely have to do some things differently. And so it's important for me to state this at the beginning because Ms. Hubbard-Williams did a great job during her budget presentation last year and asked for a lot of significant changes. My direction to her was we're going to hold that until we have a plan moving forward. I'm just not of the mindset to throw a bunch of money at stuff when we don't have a plan yet. In addition to that, so I want her to know that once you guys get through the plan, we will absolutely consider those recommendations, and hopefully it'll be new recommendations once the team starts working on it. I think it's also important for the board to understand that Ms. Wanda Paul and her team have significantly looked at all those facilities, and her and Mike Burke have been working towards finding the necessary resources because we're going to have to do some heavy lifting in some of these alternative ed spaces. So I just want to put that on the record in case you had any questions around those two pieces. I've already given staff direction to look at both of those opportunities.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to share the mission of alternative ed with you. It's to provide an environment that nurtures the social and emotional development of all students while maximizing learning and academic achievement. Currently, we have 10 alternative sites, and I'd like to start by saying, for the first time in a very long time, all of our sites are commendable or maintaining. So that's a big job for all the alternative schools. We have principals who've worked really hard to ensure that standard-based instruction takes place at their sites. So I just want to make sure that the board knows that they understand the work, they're responsible for the work, and they ensure that their staff, they're doing the standard-based instruction when students transition in and out of the facilities. Today we'll talk about our alternative ed assignments, which include behavioral type assignments as well as our enrollment and our exit policies and procedures. Currently, we have the 10 sites, And the information you see here is the FTE count. For example, Riviera Beach Prep reflects 160 students. However, throughout the year, it's a very transient population. So when you look at the real numbers, it's 250 students came through that school. And another example on the DJJ side, the detention center, it shows 47 students. However, the real number, 642 students came through that facility, and that our educational program served 642 students, whether it was 3 days or 21 days. But I just wanted to share that with the board because, you know, it could give a false narrative about who we serve and how many students that we serve. And we're going to talk about our 8.13 dropout prevention policy, the new policy that has changed. And Ms. Issa will go into details regarding that policy.
So what we're bringing forward today, and Ms. Hubbard-Williams just talked a little bit because the board had requested information regarding our alternative sites. So we gave an overview of which sites we have and the populations and the types of programs that we have. What we're really going to be talking about today is the changes that we want to make to the policy. And it's 8.13, the dropout prevention policy. And I just want to make the clarification. The policy is short as it relates to other policies that we have, because it has an extensive attachment, which is the manual. So we have policy changes, and then we're going to have manual changes as well, and I'm going to cover those. You have the scope of what the policies covers. Some key highlights that I just want to mention is that we did add, there was a question earlier regarding the language for Stoneman Douglas. We did add language inside of the manual that's going to update our language for the Senate Bill 7026 and the new 7030. And because of that language and with the classifications of the threats to schools, we have reclassified what we used to call administrative safety interventions will now be called incident-based interventions, because they will be based upon a specific incident that qualifies itself within the 7026, 7030. Another addition that we have made is we've added procedures which allow us to be able to take in students from out of county or out of state that are either sitting at an alternative site in another county or state or have been expelled by another board. So we've built those procedures in so that we can take those students and place them into alternative ed as well. Additional language is adding language to the notice of parents regarding alternative education assignments. Again, this lends itself to what we discussed earlier, more communication with the parents, clearer communication with the parents as we move through processes, and what our due process is going to look like for students who are entering alternative ed. And the last change is we're actually removing the language right now that talks about the teen parent program. The teen parent program does not fall under the alternative ed manual, and it's been in there for years. It actually sits in the Department of Safe Schools, and the program, it is a school. We do have about 100 students involved in it. So we've taken that language out, and we will be bringing forward policy 5.27 when we bring this policy forward.
So now we'll move into the types of placements, the types of assignments. There's 8 types of behavioral assignments, and we'll go into details on each of those types of assignments. The traditional assignment is the most familiar to everybody. This is consistent infractions that happen, and students are not successful based on interventions put in place by the school, and students are then placed at an alternative site. And they receive interventions in an effort to change their behavior, and oftentimes they have an opportunity to return to their school site. Our felony suspensions are incidents that might occur off campus that might have an adverse effect on the school site. A student might commit a felony. However, if that felony does not have an adverse effect on the campus, we cannot use this procedure for that particular student. We just have to keep in mind the number one thing is for it to have an adverse effect on the campus in order to consider that. Our DJJ reentry students are students who've committed a crime, a high-level crime, rape, murder, sexual battery, and they've completed a DJJ residential program, and they're able to reenter. And oftentimes students reenter via alternative ed, and then they transition back to your comprehensive campuses. And then the next is transitional. Students who have completed an audit site, completed a stay at an audit site, return to a comprehensive site. However, upon their return, they're not successful, so we will transition them back for further remediation at an alternative site. And our next is our incident-based. I think Ms. Issa touched on that. These are high-level threats as outlined in Senate Bill 7026 as well as 730. These are assignments where a student has done a high-level threat and it's an incident, case-by-case incident, and it's determined whether the student is moved to an alternative site. And our IEP team decisions, these are infractions that would normally be expellable for a gen ed student. However, the IEP team looks at the offense and determines if it's a manifestation, and then the recommendation is then made based on consideration with procedural safeguards as well. Then our IAES 45-day assignments, those are students who possess a weapon on campus or a second possession of drugs. These are ESE students who have committed a high-level incident on a campus. Those are our 45-day placements. And our academic interventions are students who are struggling academically at a comprehensive school. They might have a minimum of retention, 1-year retention, or have failing grades, or their GPA falls below a 2.0, or credit deficiency, or oftentimes a parent might request an academic setting because the setting is smaller. We've had all of these situations where the parent might make a request or the other factors as recommended by the comprehensive school for academic placements. Our charter schools, Ms. Carmona?
So a charter school may enroll a student, a parent or guardian may enroll a student in a charter school once a behavior packet has been submitted. This happens also in expulsion cases where the parent then finds out that the student's been recommended for expulsion, and they may decide to go ahead and enroll the student in a charter school rather than enroll them in one of our alternative school sites. The procedures manual the proposed procedures manual will now have a process where we can ensure that if a student was recommended for an alternative ed site, the student enrolled in a charter school, if they choose to return prior to the length of their stay in the alt ed site, they would go to the alternative education site and not be able to bypass the system and return to a comprehensive high school.
So these are the types, academic and behavior, and if you look at the chart, based on the type of assignment, we've shared the school which handles this type of intervention. So for our behavior, IEP team decisions, all of our behavioral sites cover those, our expulsions, all of our behavior sites, and Riviera Beach Prep and Crossroads are the only 2 academic sites that we currently have at this time. And our elementary behavior intervention, we're currently in the process of finding a location for that. That transition came forward because it was housed at Lincoln Elementary, and it was moved because, as we all know, Washington Elementary will occupy the space, so we have to find a new location for the elementary site.
Due process procedures. The new manual will also include a provision for due process for parents. We have specific provisions that the statute requires, including written notice, specific language that must be included in the written notice, and most importantly is notice of a right to an administrative review of any action by school personnel relating to an assignment to an alternative education site. This is part of Florida statutes, and we're now adding it to the procedures manual.
So here we discuss the exit policies and procedures. For every entry, there's a different type of exit, but the main concern is making sure that the students transition on a natural break. You may not see that for students who have been expelled and their time is just simply up, but the main point is for students to leave a campus where the grading has been complete, and no student are to stay at an alternative site beyond 1 calendar year. So, and we look at their number of absences. For academic settings, we look at whether they've passed the FSA or Algebra 1 EOC, and have they moved that GPA up to a 2.0. So those are our exit policies and procedures for students in those behavior and academic settings.
Okay, and of course, our next steps, because what you've heard thus far is our current state in regards to where we are with alternative ed and how our programs are indeed operating. And what we're asking for from the board as it pertains to our next step is that we want to move forward with reviewing the updated audit processes with school centers. And the updated processes at this time is just going to be the revised policy and working with school leaders and reviewing the policy and the manual that's now aligned to policy, and to just go through the entire audit process as it currently stands, so that we are operating with all those pieces in place. And while doing that, we want to then, with the blessing of the board, develop a team again to review the current state and outline a plan for the desired state pertaining to meeting the needs of all students. And as you heard earlier at the very beginning, we realize that there are many, many missed opportunities for our students that may in some way, form, or fashion participate within our alternative education program. And we are committed to working and looking at those opportunities and making certain that we have less of those missed opportunities for our students, and wanting to come back with another board workshop to discuss those desired state for school year 2021, because it will indeed take us some time through this year in getting this right. And not saying that we're going to stop this right now, because as you can see, our projected workshop date to come back with the desired state per board approval will then be next semester, January of 2020.
Questions? Mr. Shaw?
As we implement the mental health component of the state law now, what is the plan to provide services at all of our various centers for students to get that intervention while they're in alternative ed placement?
So we already have staff on those campuses as relates to counselors and school psychologists, and those have been offering services. Last year, we assigned co-located therapists to each one of our alternative sites, and we'll continue that next year, in addition to the new referendum supplied position for the behavioral health professionals. So we'll have at least 4 to 5 resources for those students on those campuses for the mental health and behavioral health.
Okay, and are we making any changes in how we work with youth court and the court system on DJJ on some of these issues?
Yeah,
The current manual does not contemplate any changes on the DJJ or youth court side, but that is something that I believe the team would look at the entire process
the
moving
desired
forward
state.
for the full year.
I think it's important to take a look at that.
Yes.
So,
Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you. Again, thank you so much for you guys going through all of this. It's very helpful. I've been touring alternative sites also in my tenure on the board, and it's not the best place for our students. And I always wonder, would I send my daughter there, right? So if you think that way and it doesn't fit, then you want to make it better. So I'm really glad you guys are putting this effort, and the whole thought process behind it is you guys have great hearts and you're working so hard on this. So I want to say thank you so much. Mr. Shaw stole my first question, which was about mental health resources. I love that we are putting these resources into our schools. Obviously, these are some of the kids that need it the most. So I'm glad to see that we're going to put resources there, but I don't want to skimp on these kids. I think these are the kids that, again, we have to try our best to save. Two questions. The first one is about the re-entry to a comprehensive school. If a student goes to homeschool or a charter school or a school that's out of state or county, do they have a re-entry process that we evaluate whether or not they are doing better before we put them directly back into a comprehensive school if they don't have, those kind of evaluations from whatever site they're at?
We basically would review their discipline history while they were in the charter school or private school.
So if they're in a homeschool, they obviously don't have a discipline history. So is there a way you can evaluate them before they come back?
We could possibly look at something into that, but right now, currently, if they're on home ed, no, we don't have a process.
Do they meet
for
with
that.
the staff at the new school before they come in?
We can implement something. We can look at that through the process with the resources that we presently have and work with homeschool.
Okay, that's good. And then I wanted to say a big thank you to Wanda, Paul, and to Dr. Fenoy for going to see the schools and the actual facilities. They are sometimes, when we're putting all of our funds towards schools, you put them to the schools that have the biggest advocates behind them. That's what's always happened in the past. But with our new administration, I truly believe we're making a better effort to be more equitable in our distribution of resources. And so when you go to an alternative school, they're some of the older, less beautiful places that we have. And I think that the children know if we put them in a place that isn't nice, and they're going to know that they're not being taken care of to the best of our ability. So I like that we are thinking about this and that we are going to maintain their schools better because I do want them to come back to us. I want them to be productive members of our society when we're done having this opportunity to work with them. So I would like to say a huge thank you to all the staff that have gone out and evaluated these schools and looked at them and really noticed the problems that we have had there. So as far as any of the process after this, it sounds like we're going to have private one-on-one meetings with you to talk about what your plans are for alternative ed going forward, and we're not going to really get too deep into it today?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, then I will save all my other thoughts, and thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, and thank you for this brochure here and this PowerPoint. I did travel to the alternative schools. I've actually met with Dr. Fenoy as well as others about the conditions, and he says he's working on that based on what we're talking about here. But when I look at the alternative schools, I don't know what kind of data you have, but as I look at it and I look at the children that are there, it seems like when I see all the different types of assignments, and I'm looking at the children that are in there, it seems like they all are African American, many of them are Hispanic, and very few others are there. So then I wonder about our process on identifying these children and who has to go to the alternative school. When I look at the traditional placements, and I look at the schools and I wonder if for some reason some schools may do better than others with trying to provide some support activities for those children who may have repeated behavioral infractions, or do we have some schools that send them right on over to alternative ed? When I look at the population, it worries me because I see what I see, and when we look at the percentage of African American students here in Palm Beach County, and when I go to each one of those sites, that's all I see, mainly, and maybe a few Hispanics and very few others. Something makes me know that maybe something's not happening at the comprehensive high school. And so I think we need to dig deep into that and figure out what's going on with it. And maybe it's been ongoing, but I really saw it this year, and I had conversations with many of the teachers at the alternative sites, and many times they said it's kind of like a dumping ground. So I want to be honest with you. I had a bad feeling in my mouth about it when I was doing that. So we need to kind of look at how these children are actually placed there and how can we keep them in their comprehensive schools as much as possible. And when we look at it and we see that disproportionate amount of African American students placed in alternative sites, it makes me wonder what else is going on. So I'll be digging deeper into that with you all because I'm really concerned about it. And then with the incident-based intervention, I had a situation this past year, and I just want to know about the turnaround because we could have a shooting or something could happen tomorrow. And how soon would we step into action to provide the support to the principal? Is there something already laid out if something happens within a community and children are at that particular school and it's really a serious situation? Do we have a plan of action for the school principal to know what to do to turn it around? Parents need to know, too, because many times their kids could be involved in situations and can't return to the school. So do we have some kind of template to tell the principal as well as the area region superintendent what is the plan of action? I think it's real serious because that can happen anytime. and we need to move it. It sounds like it's something where the superintendent or designee requests a case-by-case consideration, but there needs to be something that we could look at immediately if something happened tomorrow. I don't know if we have anything in place. I won't delve down on that, but we need to get something done there because I don't want to see something like that happen again. But overall, as I look at the different types of assignments and working as the representative for the juvenile justice contact person for this school board and the criminal justice division, I just want to make sure that we try to put practices in place where we're equitable for all children, and it should be kind of one-sided. Thank you.
Dr. Robinson?
So first, I want to thank you for, what was it, an hour or so yesterday of fielding my questions and comments and input. And I noticed that the PowerPoint has fewer slides now. Is that my imagination? I'm just saying. Okay.
Some of
okay.
it was duplicated, so we were cleaning it up.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So, again, I'm glad we're finally here. So let me just say, I'm going to repeat some of the things that I said yesterday in our conversation, just so that if my fellow board members get heartburn, they can express that to you. But let me start with asking this: do we have school nurses in the alternative ed sites?
Yes.
Not every day, but they're assigned there. They share a nurse.
Okay, so we need to work on that. Okay. Then I'm hoping that we can create, I don't remember seeing it in this presentation, but just like the video you talked about creating for the expulsion parents, to have a video for parents and students who are being recommended for alternative ed, right? In lay language as well as home language, right? Okay, and then I want to stress, and I think this is one of the things that I said yesterday that I want to say publicly, I really want to stress the need for us to have industry certification earning programming in the alternative ed sites. You know, Ms. Hubbard-Williams will remember that the program that's currently at Riviera Beach Prep used to be at Roosevelt Full Service Center, and we moved it to Riviera Beach Prep so that those students could take advantage of the automotive bays. Then we run into some bureaucratic crazy stuff that I hope that the people at this table will be able to figure out how to get past it. But now the students who are going to Riviera Beach Prep in the day are not able to participate in the pre-apprenticeship training program that's actually like on their campus because of some kind of funding crazy talk. But that's exactly why we put that program there. So I need us to figure that out. And then for every program, how do we give these kids job skills that they can come out of school and make money? Because people need money and they need to be able to feed their families, right? And then as part of that whole conversation, the question would come, if they started an industry certification program, let's say at Riviera Beach Prep, and they were going to transfer to one of the comprehensive schools with that continuation of that industry certification, are they going to be just kicked out of consideration because they came from alternative ed? I would hope the answer is no, but I think that we need to really look at that. If we mean what we say about providing these children with opportunities, I hope that when you come back next time that you will share with us your biggest dream, meaning what really we need to have to redirect them behaviorally, accelerate them academically, and give them a bright future, right? Even though that they've stepped off of the straight and narrow path, because it's going to be pay me now or pay me later, right? And so my point is, I'm hoping that you don't come to us with what you think the budget will allow story. I want to hear what you think we need to have in place for these kids. It doesn't mean necessarily that that is going to come out of the Palm Beach County School District budget, right? So DJJ goes for grants. Criminal Justice Commission needs to step up to the plate as far as I'm concerned. Is all these people out there who claim that they care and want to help and all that? Well, let's give them something to help. Let's give them a line item that they can help with. But first, I need you guys and then us collectively to paint the picture of what we really need in these sites to save these young people. You know, the recent medical conference, I became familiar with the term cumulative PTSD. And that's what many of our students have, right? So we generally think of the traditional definition of PTSD as the response to one life-threatening event. But we're talking about children who actually have cumulative PTSD that's multi-generational. Biogenetics, epigenetics will now tell us that some of those traumas can be passed on genetically. And so I'm really hoping that we will take the position of what do we need to do if we can get all hands on decks to save this generation, the ones who are showing up in our schools now. Because every time I see, these arrests, every time I see the sheriff with his press conferences, I think that it's often a failure of our public education system. We have the opportunity to save them, and alternative ed is often the last resort. So I know I'm preaching, but it's important. So I think it's really sad that we need to have an elementary behavior intervention site. I would like to know, as part of this ideal state, what would be required at the home school to redirect their behaviors and save them without isolating them in an elementary behavior site, right? And then, so the last thing I'm gonna say at this moment is, I still think, and I need you guys to come back and tell me, if the board waved its collective magic wand and said that we want to stress the need for academic sites, and those academic sites would also be for children who've done some little bad things, right? And reserve turning points for the kids who have done really, really bad things, right? From all over the county. What would it take to make that happen, right? I mean, I know it's not easy, but it's always, if there's a will, there's a way. Because I think that we are probably spending a significant amount of money with transportation of kids all over the county, trying to keep them away from kids that they would be in conflict with. And the truth of the matter is, Turning Points was built to house conflicting cliques, okay? And I really also, but the real reason I think that we need to strongly consider that is then we can put intensive services there, right? So now we've got all this mishmash, right? I think that if we stress the academic sites, if we had at least 3, which would mean in this scenario that I'm making up, that Crossroads would no longer be a behavior site, it would be just academic, and South Intensive would be academic. So I'm just making this up. So if we did that, we would have 3 academic sites for the kids who get lost in the big schools, right, who are struggling, and also for the kids who've made a little mistake. That might be the place where kids who've just done the one bad thing could go, and the parents would send them, right? Because it's not higher order children there, right? And then if we have the kids who've done really, really bad things in one site, then we could do intensive interventions there and bring DJJ, CJC, the sheriff, whoever, I don't know who, but intensive, because that's the last stop, right? And so I just want to know, I know everybody has said we can't do that. Well, we can if we really want to, and we want to dedicate the resources. And so as an academic exercise, I would ask it in the future that you present to this board what that would take. The board might go, oh no, we're not doing that, but I would like to know what you think that would take to do that. And And then the last thing is, guidance on these safety placements. The safety placements, now they're called incident-based placements again, right? They used to be incident-based, now they're safety, now we're back to incident. Okay, I'm just making sure I'm tracking. So, all right, so, but they worry me in that there's no guidance. And so it says that the principal supervisor has to approve and this and that, but then we'll hang the principal supervisor out to dry if we think they made a bad call. So it needs to be some guidance, not rules, but guidance for incident-based placements. And I really, really believe that that's important. And so I'm done for now. Thank you.
Mr. Superintendent?
Yeah, just for the record, I want, he's not here, but I can feel his energy, and that's Mr. Mike Burke. So I just want to put on the, I'm telling you, so I just want to put on the record, I want, and we'll let Mike know, but part of the presentation, the individual presentation with the board, it's important for Mike to talk about the numbers. I think it's also very important, one of the things that the team taught me was this real reality of, because Mike kind of showed us this reality of a drop in numbers, and the team did a really good job explaining to me, we're actually in competition with charter schools in the alternative space, if I'm saying it correctly. And so it's just something to think about. Like we're seeing high numbers of kids go to charters, and as the team explained it to me, I think it had more to do with like the lack of paperwork. Like it doesn't require as much paperwork to get, so as families choose where they're gonna put their kids in alternative spaces, they seem to be choosing these charter schools, and I don't have an opinion on that, but I'm just saying, we as you bring forward the Cadillac version of what you want, the board is going to have to hear what the hard numbers actually look like. And I'm just saying that.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, and I did appreciate what you were saying, Dr. Robinson, having gone to the charter schools. Crossroads is excellent in a sense of doing some of the things that you're talking about. Right now at Crossroads Academy, many of those students go to West Tech, and they take part in the construction academy. Then I look there and I see the mentors, and I see the community involvement, helping these children who didn't make it at the comprehensive schools. So we have some models here that we can look at that's really working. And then when I walk over to South Area Intensive, which is really, really critical, I didn't see any of those kinds of things going on with those children. So we really need to, as board members, we need to go see those sites. I mean, until you go see, then you really don't know. Sometimes people can bring things back to you, but you need to get on the ground and see what's going on and look at the children and see who's actually being served and how they're being served. I think our communities want to help us because they recognize what's happening when we actually put the children in these placements and we're not providing them what other children are getting. And as I've spoken with Ms. Hubbard this year, I thought about it. When you look at a comprehensive school and you see all the great things that are going on, and then you go over to the alternative school, you don't see it. I've been sitting here asking about the kitchen at Turning Points. We spent all that money on a beautiful facility there, and that kitchen has been sitting there dormant since I've been on this board. So all the things that we're talking about, I think as board members, we need to go to our sites and look at them and talk to the people, talk to the children, talk to the staffs. And they can tell you the kinds of things also that we need to be doing. So there's a lot of work to be done. And when I'm looking at these children, these are some of the children that are coming from our homes that are a lot distressed, and they need a whole lot of help. And so we really do want to provide them a place that's going to be above reproach as it relates to academics and support services, as well as the abilities to do great things. At Crossroads Academy, we had so many children graduating this year, going to college, and that's because of a combined effort of the principal, the community, the area, the region office, and all of us coming over there at the honor roll events and doing what was necessary to embrace those children. Well, it's going to take a lot of that plus the money. So we need to kind of look at the whole piece of the puzzle. Thank you.
Dr. Robinson?
So just to follow up on Dr. Fenoy's comments, so, you know, I've been told the entire time that I was on the board how expensive alternative ed is, and there's always been these little subtle attempts to whittle away at it. And And I just say, you know, ignorance is free and criminality is low cost. And so it's pay me now, pay me later. So I get Mike Burke, I know if he was there, he'd be bright red already. I mean, just when I was talking about the whole thing, I know he would have turned red and he'd be looking at me going, oh my God, Dr. Robinson, what are you trying to do? But still, we need to look at it because somebody has to save these kids. And it seems to me it's us, right? And then, but the other thing is, so, yeah, I have visited the alternative ed schools. Sometimes I think I live at Riviera Beach Prep every now and then. But but I tell you what's interesting is consistently when I've talked to young people, and I remember I had a sit down with a bunch of students at Turning Points. Were you with me, Mr. Oswald, one time? I don't. Okay. So and I would ask them, tell me what we need to do differently so that your younger siblings don't end up in Turning Points, right? And they consistently said, give them a teacher that cares. Consistently, right? So if we want to decrease the alt ed budget, we need to invest in some more professional development, maybe along the capturing the kids' hearts or whatever the right one is, to develop those relationships and including the relationships across races and across genders, right? And there was another point I want to make, and I can't remember what it was now. So I guess I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Superintendent?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our workshops for the evening, and I will turn the meeting back over to you.
All right, so we will adjourn until 5 o'clock. No, I'm sorry, we have two, three.